That worked really well. Is everyone here for the diary study session? Cool. All right. I'm going to be whizzing through this really quickly because there's elements of hands-on stuff, examples, and I have to run through the theory as well. So please bear with me. I will take questions at the end. But meanwhile, while you are watching the presentation, feel free to post on Twitter or keep a note of questions that you want to ask. So basically the motivation, well, I'll say a bit about me, who I am, because I think I'm speaking to a lot of folks who I've not met you before. I'm a UX designer at an agency called Sapien Nitro. So Sapien does mostly brand, marketing, design and build stuff, interaction stuff. I was formerly a developer. I switched careers into UX design because that's currently my passion. When I was doing that before, I was working with a bunch of startups. I did a lot of prototyping work. I worked with telecoms, and I did some work around rich internet apps. I came to London basically to complete a master's in human-computer interaction here at UCL. In my spare time, I also spend a lot of time with the UX community, and I organize an event called UX Camp London, which I highly recommend if you want to check it out. Currently we have I know it's promotion there, but check out the website. We don't have a lot of details right now. The only thing I can tell you, it will run on July the 14th, and it's an unconference, kind of like this one, but free to attend. And it's basically anyone who's interested in UX come to a session like this and share with each other using a barcamp style grid. It's a one-day unconference. So the motivation for this talk is really to look at the overlap between qualitative user research and the whole principle behind Lean Startup, which is, to me, all about customer validation. So the point of this talk is to see how we can use diary studies as a really quick and simple tool to validate your customers or to understand more about your customers. So at the end of the day, what I want you to take away from this talk is how to plan and visualize your research with validated data. And what I mean by validated is the same thing that you get from Steve Blank's book and the Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development book, is validating from what users really do rather than what they say or think, or your own assumptions about what they do or think. So in that sense, what you're doing is you're making your decision making based on real data, and thereby improving your chances of building what they really want. So some assumptions. Again, this is my definition of a startup. I'm borrowing directly from Eric Ries's definition. And the two main points here is, again, the validated customer insight, and something that's really actionable, something that you can really put into practice, right? Something that you can learn from and work on. And this is repeatable. Again, the second point I want to make is that in previous years, I think the tendency was to spend a lot of research and effort on what he calls the customer archetype. And in the user experience paraphernalia, we use a lot of tools like personas, which also, I think, is coming to a point where it's almost like fictitious. We're creating these personas, or we're creating these models out of these assumptions we have about customers oftentimes. So we want to get rid of that and move away from that and assume, to admit that a lot of the times these customer archetypes are hypotheses. So what happens is that we start with an assumption. There's nothing wrong with that, but we're testing our hypothesis over and over again. So that's basically where diary studies sit. Raise your hand if you don't know what I mean by this diagram. Does anybody know what I'm talking about with customer validation? Okay, so is anyone don't understand what this chart is? Okay, so everyone understands where it comes from. They've either read the book or heard about it, right? So basically, the first part is where diary studies will bring you real value. It's basically in customer discovery and validation, and that's where you would apply this diary study research method to do that. Some caveats about this talk. Diary studies obviously isn't a silver bullet. I can only cover the basics here. I can't. It took me quite a while to learn how to apply research in a qualitative way that meant something to me. I'm from an engineering background. I used to think in terms of A plus B equals C. It took me many years until I finally got to understand a lot more about the soft approaches to understanding how customers work. But I will point out the practical examples that you can apply to start that process and hopefully get moving much quicker so that you don't repeat the mistakes I made. At the same time, there is a lot of help around. I know a lot of UX practitioners who are familiar with the diary study method, and then if you come to me at the end of the talk, I will point them out so that this will continue to be a conversation because it's a two-way thing. At the same time, I want to learn from you as well about if you've seen something similar or if you have applied something similar, I want to learn from you as well. Because I've only done it a certain way, and there are many ways to do diary studies. So, at a high level, from 30,000 feet, what are diary studies? This is what I'm going to talk about. How do we analyze and gain insights from it? What are the practical things that you can learn to apply? And some ideas of how to apply it from a lean startup framework. So the definition of a diary study. Okay, this is where I start defining it. Basically, it's a way for you to get users to fill in data, facts about themselves, about their own behavior, that you can observe from a distance. So this isn't. It's different. It's a different qualitative method in the sense that you're observing from a distance. A lot of qualitative research sends you out into the field, where you're observing, you're taking notes, you're making interviews, you're doing focus groups, not really, but basically you don't have to be in front of the user all the time. So that there are some really great cost benefits for that, because you're not spending all of this immersive time with the user, but you're getting quite a lot of qualitative data from that. And it's in context, because when they're filling in the data, the diary data, they're doing it in the context of their own on their own lives. So what you're doing is you're getting a snapshot of what they would do on a normal day. You're not faking it. You're not bringing them into a lab. You're not telling them to do certain things and sticking stuff to their heads, right? So yeah, I covered some of that. Benefits is that it's remote. It's contextual. You get to see how they behave. You can sample quite flexibly over certain periods of time, whether it's a week, whether it's 3 days or a month. At the same time, you can integrate it with your existing tools. So if you use Google Analytics, if you use Kissmetrics, if you use any kind of tools that you have, you can use that with the data that you get from diary studies to compare and contrast. It's really flexible. There are a lot of things that you can do to make it, to tweak it, to your own requirements. So here's kind of how it works. At the beginning, I'm going to pull up my, because I bought this thing, and I should stop using it. I'm pointing to this stuff. Just give me a minute here. Alright. So this is kind of where I start, right? At the beginning, what you want to do is you want to gather a group of users to observe, and you can do it however you want. You want to hire people through a recruitment firm, recruiting agent, or if you want to do some snowball sampling, which is basically you asking a bunch of friends who know people who fit this requirement, and then have them ask their friends, and them ask their friends. That's basically the snowball sampling method. And once you get that group of people, then you start writing out a plan for how you want to carry out your study. But basically, what you see here is this sort of at the simplest method. You have this form where it's basically question answer, and you give them this form and tell them, oh, okay, Mr. Participant, over the next few days, I would like you to fill out this form over whenever you do X or at a certain time. So let's say you are working on a product that that helps people search for images. So you want to understand how people use images on the internet. So you could tell them, okay, Mr. Participant, every time you see an image on the internet, please fill out this form, or please say when you've done this, or at certain times in the evenings or at home. So you can tweak it to your requirement, whether it's time-based or location-based or task-based. The reason why I have a photo of a lady with a mobile phone is that you can also make it non-paper form. You could build an app and have them input that data into an app. For example, I've heard people use Twitter as a collection method. So instead of at a certain time, you could send them an SMS or send them a Twitter message. Hey, Mr. So-and-so, what do you think of your feeling today? How are you feeling today? And they'll respond that way. So there's no one way to collect your data, which is a good thing. The bad thing is that finding out which method to use, you may have to go through some trial and error periods to see which one's right for you. And over the course of time, what you want to do, and this is what I think differentiates diary studies from other methods, is that all the users really need to focus on is just dumping facts. You don't want to force your users too much to think about or reflect about their own behavior. A lot of times users don't really know why they do certain things. What you want to do is to just give them a means for them to say what I'm doing now. And then later on, you want to follow up with a phone interview or maybe a face-to-face interview, or sit back with the data that you've got over a period of time and analyze that for yourself. And this is where you start to fill the gaps. This is the why answering time, where you're going through the data and you kind of go, hey, that's sort of interesting. Why was this user looking at this website, looking at this image? So then you would speak to the user over the phone and say, hey, Mr. User, what were you trying to do here? Could you walk me through this process? And that's when you really get all the cool stuff, right? This is when you start like tapping out stuff onto your Excel sheet, which is what I did for my diary study, and just literally just kind of say, okay, she did this, she did that, she did that, she did this. And through that process, you're really gaining insight about how they work. Then to me, this is a really good time of using the five whys method that you keep hearing about in the Lean Startup book. So you can do why did you do this, why did you do that, or what happened when you did this, and you can start using the interview session to gain insight from your users. This is, I think, more of a UX thing than um, that you can also apply. What we tend to do as user experience designers is that we collect the data first and then go into a big room with big walls and extract all the data points and organize them before we come up with the big solution. Oftentimes, there's a lot of overlap between this period and this period. There will be a lot of interesting insight that you would already learn from this period because you would have been immersed in the user's world. You would have already been filled with this amazing insight. But then it's also good to take a step back from your data and spend some time massaging it, because then you'll be working with multiple participants. And so you want to see what's similar about these different participants. You want to extract the patterns from those behaviors. And this is when you would also start to overlap with your own metrics, with your own existing research data. So I've already mentioned this before. These are some of the things that you can get participants to record. Again, they don't require a lot of thinking for participants to do. They don't have to think about, okay, why am I doing this? I don't know. They don't have to think too much. It's kind of like a brain dump. And this is the diary form that I've used for. It's very, very simple. Start time and what are you doing now? So literally, the users don't have to, they don't have to spend too much time recording this stuff. At the same time, you could make it kind of like a Q&A style, where they can fill in whatever they want, like a open-ended opinion, or if you want something straightforward like yes, no, gender-based, you can swing it either way. At the same time, you can combine, mix and match, and tweak it to your own requirements. I'm gonna skip past this slide because I've talked about it already. But basically, it's about separating your analysis from your data collection. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a bit about how to analyze the data that you've gotten from your diary studies. Some of it is going to be overly simplistic, but I think that going through the motion will help you think through your data a bit more. What happens? I'm going to pull up an Excel sheet from my own work. Actually, I'll just use that. So I had a big spreadsheet of all the comments that I made from my interviews with participants. So what I did was to extract a lot of these points that I got from the participants, and I put it down on Post-it notes. So this is just a tool that we call affinity mapping. Have you guys heard of affinity mapping, or or should I stop? Because I don't want to repeat stuff that you've already heard. So affinity mapping is basically a tool that you can use to organize and analyze your data. What you want to do is extract points or facts from your data, and then put it in Post-it notes, but don't rearrange them yet. So once you've gotten all your Post-it notes on the wall, then you start pulling together things that are similar, and then after that, you hopefully on a different Post-it note, which I don't have here, then you start creating these topics or themes, and you can go around until all the Post-it notes are done, right? Then you want to be able to step back and see, okay, are there some patterns here? What insights are there I can gain from this stuff? Then the other method that I use is to illustrate the whole process using visualizing relationships and worldviews. So I'll take this away because presumably you would already done all the concept mapping and got an idea of what your data does. So,
sorry, I think Eric is starting like about now, which is why everybody's running away.
He's starting in 5 minutes though.
Is it 4:10? You sure?
Yeah, it's been pushed
okay.
away.
Oh, cool.
But I think people are wanting to get a good seat. I'm kind of getting a bit jittery now because there's people leaving my talk.
Oh, begin with the left,
Yeah. Well, I think what I'll do is I'll put this up. Okay. Can you guys read this?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. You can either go to Google, search rich pictures, or you can come to me after the session, and I'll talk you guys through it.
What's that? Rich pictures?
Yeah, rich pictures.
And what's that?
It's basically a way for you to visualize the ecosystem of the area that you're studying. It's a bit more specific to just drawing stuff randomly, and yeah, it's there are some little things that you can do to help. If you're not a visual person, if you're not very comfortable with drawing things out, I think rich pictures is a sort of a simple way to start practicing visualization in your work. That's all. That's the main point of using rich pictures. Skip this. I think the good part that I want to mention is that when you start to apply diary studies, there are quite a few tips, articles on the method on the internet, but the main thing that I want to say is start small, be nimble, tweak and adjust as you go along. Don't try to swallow too much from the plate, because what you want to do is to find the right method, the method that you're most comfortable with, because there's so many ways you can get data from your users. At the same time, the other tip that I want to give is to bring an observer, because a lot of times, in my experience, when I was trying to apply this method in a non-UX friendly or non-lean startup friendly environment, is that there wasn't any buy-in. I get all these amazing facts, amazing insights, but nobody will want to learn from it. So bring an observer with you, and that shared experience will basically make the whole process more efficient, because you've got different viewpoints, and it begins the conversation. The other thing I've already mentioned is to map the data that you have with your existing tools. So don't forget or dismiss your existing research data. Try to correlate the qualitative data with your existing data. And at the same time, you can use diary studies not just to understand your customers, but to also validate your assumptions about your businesses. I think it's kind of an obvious thing. I don't want to spend too much time on it. There's an interesting story from this set of data that I observed from my diary studies. So the area that I was studying is what were users doing when they looked at images on the internet? Were they looking specifically for images to download for their work? Did they do it for pleasure? So on and so forth. Why were they looking at images on the internet? So it turns out that this lady, she's a Mexican. She's from Mexico. She doesn't speak English very well, so she uses Google Images as a way to translate what she's looking for in English. She's looking for her boyfriend's parents are coming to the apartment. She's supposed to make a big meal. She wants to make this authentic Mexican dish, but she knows that every time she searches on the internet, the results that she gets are of the American variety, which is not authentic. So she uses Google Images to say, oh, okay, that actually looks authentic. Then she clicks on that and then gets the Mexican version of that recipe. So you can get some really, really interesting insights like that that you wouldn't be able to just by looking at pure metrics. So a lot of times what actually happens with qualitative data is that you will get a lot of these sort of tangential facts about your users, which may not make sense with what the problem you're focusing on. But keep that aside, because later on it may make sense later, because what you're trying to do is build a more holistic view of your business. And it forces you to think more creatively about how to observe your data, how to carry out research, and even be more less precious about like numbers and tweaking things like metrics. So just to summarize, it's a really flexible tool. Tweak to your own requirements. Do it rapidly, so you're tightening that learning cycle. Use it to address gaps in your research. Integrate it by all means. And here are some key URLs. I'll post this on the internet. If you follow me at this Twitter ID, I'll post it up later on in the week. Otherwise, come find me, and let's all go to Eric's talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Boon.
I'll give you my Twitter.
Do you have an email address? Boon or
Boon.
Boon?
Yeah.
Boon?
Yeah.
Cham?
Chew. CHEW.
CHUW?
Chew.
So Boon Chew.
Yeah. Dot chew.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay.
This was very, very useful for me.
Okay. Yeah, we can chat more. So,
Yes, yeah. I'm trying to set up an open book for financial innovation, and gaining insight about the knowledge space that doesn't exist is very difficult. So yeah, maybe we can have a chat later on.
Okay. Sorry, I had to rush through the whole thing.
No, but it was very useful. You did it very well. Thank you for taking your time.
And,
Are you coming to the talk?
yeah, I think